Hi everyone, this is Laura, or Aquamarine18, and I'm just jumping online quickly to film a video response to the tag myfirsttarot, which was started by Simon over at the Hermit's Cave. I'll put a link to the video where he introduces the tag below. He kind of invites us to talk about our first tarot deck, how we got it, how old we were, what we used it for, how it found us or how we found it, and so on. And my response to this tag, which is actually my first tag, suitably enough, is perhaps a bit unconventional in that I don't know what my first deck of tarot cards was, and I don't have it to show you, obviously. I got my first deck of tarot cards around the age of kind of 11 or 12 from my mom, and I, at the time, was really kind of enamored by anything kind of witchy. So this was about 20 years ago. I had seen the film The Craft with Neve Campbell, which I just thought was the coolest thing. I was watching Charmed on the WB, and anything kind of witchy themed kind of pop culture I was quite interested in, and so I had various items kind of related to that, and this deck of tarot cards was one of those. And I've kind of looked for it. I've asked my family if they know if it's still kind of around the house. My parents still live in the house that I largely grew up in. And my mom remembers me having this deck and remembers me liking this deck, but has no idea if it's still kind of around and where it would be in the house. So I'm still kind of hoping that that first deck turns up at some point, and if it does, I'll perhaps do a My First Tarot Take 2 video. But for the time being, I have no idea what my first tarot deck was. I was just too young to remember, and at some point between kind of that young age and my, I guess, probably mid-teens, I kind of lost interest, and it, I imagine, got put in the bottom of a drawer, and who knows where it ended up between now and then. So instead of showing my first tarot, which I don't have, and I wanted to show something, I thought that I would show what's really my second tarot, but is the first deck that I bought for myself as an adult when I became interested in kind of reconnecting with the cards about 5 years ago. And when I started to think about that, I think it was probably prompted perhaps in part by discovering the show Carnivàle, which was on HBO. Probably a lot of people have seen it. The opening credits for that have a series of tarot cards kind of falling on a table, and the camera goes in and out. I'll link to a clip of it if I can find one. And one of the characters in that show reads tarot as well. And seeing that kind of, I thought, oh, I had those when I was young and I really loved them, and I'm going to go on the internet and read about them and see what I can find. And I started kind of digging around and was quite interested by what I found, and seeing that tarot was something that people were very much kind of engaging with in all kinds of ways. And I thought, oh, you know, if maybe I'll be interested in looking at these cards again. So I started kind of researching to find out what deck I would like to buy, because I very quickly obviously got the impression that there were quite a few to choose from. And of course I kept coming across the same advice that probably a lot of us come across when we're looking for a first deck, which is to buy the Rider-Waite-Smith. But 5 years ago when I looked at the Rider-Waite-Smith, I wasn't drawn to it. I feel very differently about it now. But at the time I thought, no, this is not for me. It doesn't feel contemporary. It doesn't have a kind of aesthetic that really draws me in so much. So I started kind of looking around for something that might appeal to me just aesthetically a little bit more, but would be maybe similar in terms of a kind of imagery and style, system, if you will. And the deck that I landed on and ended up purchasing as my first as an adult was the Gilded Tarot by Ciro Marchetti, which I'm sure many folks have already seen. And And I picked it for a number of reasons. One is just it's full of all of my favorite colors, these kind of jewel tones. Here's the back of dark blue and dark green and dark purple. It has a kind of steampunk kind of vibe that I also quite like. Now the cards are going to go everywhere, so you can see it has this kind of style with old clocks and things, which quite appealed to me. And I got the deck out of my kind of cupboard to make this video. It's not a deck that I've read with in quite some time, in years really, but it's the one that I ended up really, I guess, learning tarot on as an adult, which was great for me because the book by Barbara Moore is really excellent. So this was kind of my only tarot learning resource, or very primary tarot learning resource for quite some time before I started to get, you know, a second deck, which was the Rider-Waite-Smith. And then over the last kind of 5 years, doing a lot of learning and a lot of study, and the cards becoming much more like a part of my everyday life in ways that 5 years ago really I never imagined would have happened. But yet here I am making videos about them for YouTube and talking about this first deck. So it's okay, I think, that my first deck is missing in a way, or unknown to me. It still, I think, is kind of what springboarded me towards my second deck, which was the Gilded Tarot, and to my practice currently, which also obviously looks nothing like you know, what I was doing, pulling a card and looking in the book at kind of age 11 or 12, just being really enamored by the imagery. But I'm still enamored by the imagery, and I'm glad that that first deck, wherever it may be, came into my life when it did, because perhaps if it hadn't, I wouldn't have found my second deck, and I wouldn't have found myself here. So that's my first deck story, and I hope to participate in more tags in the future. Thank you, Simon, for kind of starting this conversation, and I'm looking forward to watching everybody else's responses. So thanks for watching, and have a great night.